A Tiny Revolution features adults having adult conversations, which means that adult language is probably going to be present, just so you know. Before we start this episode, a quick trigger warning. This episode of A Tiny Revolution contains conversations that talk explicitly about sexual assault and rape, especially within church and Christian contexts, so listener discretion is advised. Hey everyone, you're listening to A Tiny Revolution, a podcast about ordinary people living revolutionary lives. My name is Kevin Garcia. Welcome to episode 70, and this is the second time I've had to record this because technical difficulties are a bitch. I love you. How you doing? How you been? How's your week been? I started seminary today, so I'm only a little bit tired and a little bit mentally fried from discussing natural evil versus moral evil. I didn't know that there was a difference, to be honest. So, we're really diving in deep into this whole scholarly business. I'm thrilled. I really, really am. So keep me in your prayers as I begin this new journey in seminary. A little bit of announcements real quick. I'm going to be in Orlando next month for the Reformation Project's National Conference. So if you want to come to Orlando with me in the middle of October, and a bunch of other amazing people like Matthias Roberts, Britt Barron is going to be there as a speaker. Justin Lee is going to be there if you know him from his work. Literally all the humans, everyone you've ever wanted to hang out with is going to be in Orlando. So why not come hang out with us? So go ahead and go over to reformationproject.org/Orlando. Get your tickets. I'm going to be leading worship, running around doing other stuff for TRP, as well as being on a panel with a bunch of other intersectional identity folks. It's going to be such a good time. Again, that's reformationproject.org/Orlando. Go ahead and go check that out. It's going to be incredible. So, today on the podcast, if you didn't hear it at the very top of the podcast, there is a trigger warning associated with this podcast, because in this conversation, we're going to be talking about, pretty explicitly about sexual assault and rape, especially within church context. So if you are somebody who is sensitive to topics like that, or need to stop it in the middle of it and come back to it, please take care of yourself during it. But I do think stories like this are important. So, who is coming on the podcast today? It's my friend, the Reverend Chrissy Reeves Pendergrass. Chrissy grew up in eastern New Mexico and West Texas and is the daughter of a minister and a school teacher. She went to college at the University of Texas, El Paso, and studied clinical health psychology and English and American literature, and she graduated there from 2011. And throughout her college years, Chrissy worked at various churches and served as everything from an intern youth director to a children's director. She's currently an ordained elder in the UMC, that's United Methodist Church, serving in the South Carolina Annual Conference, and she's the pastor of Gilbert United Methodist Church. In 2012, she married the Reverend Weston Pendergrass, who's also a UMC pastor in South Carolina, aka they are double pastor life, which we get into a little bit in here. In addition to that, Chrissy is a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault and suffers from some symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And she was going through that mostly during her seminary career. And now she's a fierce advocate for women and women's issues in the church, understanding that mental health and better mental health care are available for everybody. So let's go ahead and dive into it. If you are ready for it, honey, let's go. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into this conversation. Grab yourself a cup of coffee. Grab yourself, something delightful to you. And with that, let's go ahead and just dive into the conversation. This is my talk with my friend Chrissy Reeves Pendergrass.
Okay, I am Chrissy Reeves Pendergrass. I am a United Methodist clergy, and I'm married to United Methodist clergy.
Double pastor action.
Yes, clergy couple, headache life. So I'm both a bad pastor and a bad pastor's wife.
Dope.
That's fine. It's nice to fail at multiple things at one time and other people's perceptions. I have a beautiful adopted son who is biracial, who is 19 months old and into everything.
Wow.
This is probably not something I'd tell at a cocktail party, but like you asked what my deal is and how I got into this world. I was married at 19 and divorced at 22.
Wow, married at 19, shit.
I know, and it did not end well.
I mean, as I would imagine most marriages at 19.
Well, yeah, but this I think was outside the norm. So it was really abusive, emotionally, physically. Physical not as much. That was towards the end. But then sexual assault was a major key component of that relationship.
Wow.
But I had no vocabulary for that because I grew up being told by the purity gospel, right, that sex was good inside of marriage. Mm-hmm. And I had no way to identify what was happening and what that meant for about 3 years. So so because of after the Me Too and the Church Too movement, I just felt like God was telling me to stop separating myself from my story. Mm-hmm. So I decided to write my memoir, and I wrote that over Lent, which was crazy and fast. And
so you did it over literally just in 40 days.
Yes. Yeah,
well, that is one way to do it.
In 40 days is crazy, just so you know.
Oh, I know, because when I was a missionary kid and they were teaching me how to be a writer for Jesus, I wrote my first memoir in 6 weeks, and it was 60,000 words. It's a piece of shit. Yeah. My first memoir is a piece of shit. I'm sure yours is brilliant and lovely.
I have no idea. But then I was told I have a lot of, I got in contact with Sarah Heath, and she is amazing and love her.
Aw, my BB.
She's one of those people that I hate to talk to her, and here's why. Because I find myself admitting the horrible, dark things that I don't tell anybody else. Mm. You know what I mean? She opens up this vulnerable space, and I find myself spewing all of my deep, dark insecurities.
That's very... I do the same thing, but just I'm wondering who my person is. My person is just somebody who's not on the internet and not because it's one of these things where just all of my friends who work in the same world, because we have so much dirt on each other, we could probably end each other's careers. So it's mutually assured destruction, which is a weird thing to laugh about, I think.
World, so
yeah, but yeah. So you're talking to Sarah Heath, and what?
Yeah, and so she basically told me to get my ass in gear and start platform building and that kind of stuff. And connected me to Abingdon, although they said that they tend to shy away from tougher topics, so they probably won't publish me, which is okay.
Publishing is so hard. I am 2 years into trying to find somebody to look at my work, and I'm just now getting to a point where there might be a viable option.
I'm really considering maybe even not the traditional publishing route. I don't know.
Yeah, self-publishing is totally an option, and if you do it well, you can really make some good money and continue to have control over it. But that's probably another question for another time. I want to know about the actual memoir itself, though. So talk to me. Who is she? What is she talking about? I assume you're talking about your story.
Yeah, so it's me. It is called, currently I called it Shattered Fairy Tales. Mm-hmm. A journey from a purity ring to a psych ward to a pulpit.
That's a title right there.
Thank you.
A journey from the purity ring to a psych ward to the pulpit.
Yeah, so it starts with my first date with my ex-husband, which ended in a car wreck.
Fuck.
Really fitting for the entire next 3 years of my life.
Not a sign or anything.
No, I really probably should have read into that a little bit more.
Maybe.
I did not, but hindsight is 2020. Mm-hmm. And it talks about here's this person that's super toxic but seems really charming and wonderful and can be anything to anybody. Just total chameleon.
Right.
He looked at an Abercrombie and Fitch model, which,
Ooh.
I know, but horrible things can come in beautiful packages.
That's the damn truth right there.
So it goes from there, and it follows me through the first couple years, or through my marriage. through his abuse, his infidelity. Like, there's like a scene where I come home and there are cop cars on my lawn because he's in the military. And funny enough, infidelity is a crime in the military. So he was not just coveting my neighbor's wife, he was sleeping with her. And police were called, and I had to come home to find cop cars in my house. And here I'm like this like sweet little PK, right, who comes home and finds police cars on my lawn. And so like it has stuff like that, but it talks about times where he would like clean his gun when I got him upset. So
that's weird.
Well, I mean, obviously that's a threat, right?
I mean, yeah, that's like high key, like danger zone, to say the least.
The weird thing though is like you don't necessarily like it builds to that point where you don't.
Did you kind of become desensitized to a lot of the things that you were like?
Absolutely, because it's. I mean, you know, like when you're kind of getting used to being called stupid or whatever, you stop noticing things that you should probably notice. It's kind of like, you know, like if you put one of my therapists described it as if you put a lobster in a boiling pot of water and just slowly brought it to a boil, the lobster wouldn't know they're dying. If you did
shit. That's a metaphor.
And I was like, oh.
How is that what's happening to me right now?
I mean, I was already out by that point, but like there was really no vocabulary that I had to even deal with suffering because I just didn't. It's not something, and I didn't come from like a super evangelical upbringing. You know, like I came from mainline Methodism, which I wouldn't call majorly evangelical.
Yeah, but still, it just didn't give you any language to talk about.
Right, and I think everyone shied away from those, like, once again, those tougher topics. But then,
so like,
I think popular theology at that point was really kind of like therapeutic Jesus.
Like Jesus is going to make you feel good. Jesus is here to like save you from your problems. Jesus is, if you just believe the right things, Jesus will fix it.
True love waits, and if you're just captivating and kiss dating goodbye, everything will be beautiful and wonderful.
Oh my God, Captivating! I forgot about that one.
Oh my God, that book totally screwed me up. Like, not even kidding. I kissed dating goodbye person. Didn't have a purity ring because my mother thought that it was stupid. So like good on her. Like she just didn't buy into those things. She's like, I'm not going to pay money. Just don't have sex. I'm like, cool. So here's what's so sad about me is like, I didn't even like my, like I wasn't around people who did purity rings, but like I wanted so badly to be this amazing, like I loved Jesus so much. And I thought that was the only way that I went myself, like walked myself to the Bible bookstore and bought my own purity ring and signed the pledge all by myself. Like it wasn't like you signed
the pledge like in a bookstore?
Yes.
Wow. You were a super Christian.
I was. I had so many WWJD bracelets.
Oh my God. So you mentioned at the very top that like as you post-divorce and then like with the Me Too movement happening, it kind of started giving you language around these things. Like when was like the moment when you realized, oh, my last marriage was not normal?
So I probably realized that. So I got divorced in 2011. So I probably realized that about a year later. And maybe about 18 months later, I was able to call it rape. I think I just kind of kept it to I just wanted to separate my story from my ministry until the Me Too movement. And I just kind of realized that I can't do that anymore.
Right. So was it one of these things? So this was like if you don't want to answer anything, you don't have to answer anything you don't want to. But like, I know a lot of people don't even believe that rape can even occur within the bounds of marriage because sex is something that partners do with each other. Sex is something that you're supposed to do. Yeah, and it's expected. Yeah. But marital rape is totally a thing.
Absolutely.
Because we don't talk about consent enough.
Right. I would say that I never even knew what the word was until college, and I had already been, violated. So what's your question, Kevin?
Oh, I guess the question is just like, Sorry, the thing with me is just like I just spitball things and then
no, it's cool. I just want to answer it correctly.
I guess just like around the time you started realizing that's what it was, like how did you come to realize this? Were you in therapy, or was it just kind of just like you unpacking your own experiences?
Yeah, so I was in therapy, and I was at Duke Divinity at the time in seminary, and I'm engaged to someone else, who's now my husband, who's amazing and wonderful, and just the kindest feminist you'll ever meet. He's amazing. Everyone
I'm looking for one. If you have another one around, let me know.
I would share, except that, well, no, I won't share. Let me backtrack. If I find someone, I'll pass them along.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
But I won't share. I like mine. So I think he and I so first it started with, randomly my senior year of college, I read a book in, young adult fiction. So one of my majors was, literature, and it was called Speak. I don't know if you've ever heard about it. It was really kind of popular. There was like a Showtime movie about it, and it's got this young girl. She's like a freshman, and she is raped at a party right before she starts high school. And in her panic, she dials 911, and the party is raided, and her friends ostracize her. Wow, and she's so upset that she doesn't tell anybody what actually happened. So she calls the police, and the party, right, is stopped. And so they think she just destroyed this party. And she actually doesn't say a word out loud until about 3/4 of the way through the book, until her friend starts dating the boy that raped her.
Oh, God.
And so she decides to break her silence to warn her friend. It's an amazing book. So good. Real, but so good. So I read that, and Wes and I were dating, and I said, and it kind of hit me weird. And he was like, and I remember him saying one time, wait, did he force himself on you? And I said something like, no, I mean, there was this one time that got kind of weird, and I don't, like, I didn't really know what to say, and I completely backtracked and, like, shut that in a box for, like, another year.
It was like, holy shit, that's true, but I'm not going to talk about it.
Yeah, because if I pretend it's not true, then it won't be, right? Because I think your mind sometimes with trauma can put it away until you're really ready to deal with it. I mean, in all honesty, I don't think I was. I had just been divorced, divorce was enough. I was 22, just figuring out the world. I had more trauma than I knew how to cope with at that time.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So, it was about a year later, and I'm in therapy, and I'm having like panic attacks, which I found out later is PTSD. And I'm telling my therapist about that one really violent time that I can really remember. That was just way above and beyond. And I remember looking at her and saying, I think I was raped. Like, just kind of like this weird, like, it almost felt like time stood still. And she said, I think that's exactly what happened. So then the session ended, and I immediately run to my car, get in it, drive. I lived on campus. So I drove to Weston's apartment, my fiance, get there, like fall in his arms crying and telling him what he already had figured out, to be quite honest. And then I just remember throwing up in his sink because it was like it just happened.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah.
And then I had to shower like most women do. Like I showered to like, like a little loofah until like your skin turns raw. It was almost like it had like literally just occurred, even though it was years prior.
My God. Yes. And so, I'll share, like, I don't think I've ever really talked. I don't talk about this often, but like when I was in high school, I was sexually assaulted myself. And,
it is so common.
It is so common.
You have to stop pretending it's not.
And it was a guy who was like super popular in school, but it was one of those things like how my trauma response happened is just like my brain blocked it out. To where like I know for a fact, I know what happened. Like he forced me at knife point to perform oral sex on him. And then because he was dropping me off after a theater rehearsal. And I remember going inside the house, just very like, oh yeah, everything's fine. I'm okay. And like I got home from theater rehearsal because I don't want to tell my parents, because why would a guy do that to me unless I was gay? So like it was all these like threats of being outed and then people at school finding out. And so I just kept it locked up. And then it wasn't until I was out of the closet and like dating guys and like, wanting to perform oral sex on them, but just like not being able to, because like I would have all these like super triggering response, like my body would just like have these responses. And it was like one night, it was with my last partner, and we're being intimate and whatnot, and I have to stop him because I'm starting to have a panic attack. And then I realize, oh my God, I'm having this panic attack because like this happened to me. And it was exactly like you just said it. Like I just start crying. I start collapsing in on myself. Like I don't want to be touched. It's like it just happened.
Yes. And it can have a real response, like a real problem with your like current, interpersonal relationships.
Cause like, I don't know, like a lot of, if like the person you're with like isn't prepared for, and like who could be prepared for something like that? But just like, I remember like, I immediately felt bad because I'm pretty sure my partner thought it was about them when it wasn't. And, we then had we started like changing how we did sex based on that. And so like, even now, like, if I'm dating someone like, and we're starting to get intimate, like I choose to self-disclose on the front end about like how I'm a little weird about oral sex sometimes. And like, it's annoying. And like, but everything that you just said about like going right back into the moment, that feels so real and it's scary. And so when you had
like the hard thing is like, so there was this one incident that I could kind of like parse out first, but then you kind of start to backtrack and go through and think about every instance. And just kind of like this realization that sexual assault had become a part of my daily life.
Wow.
Because consent is like an enthusiastic yes, right? And if you're afraid for any reason, like if you're threatened, like in yours, you were threatened at a knife point. My God, of course that's total coercion. But like I lived in fear of disappointment, of being yelled at, him putting holes in walls, him grabbing me, putting his hands on his hips where I could see his gun in his pants, right? Like, because he was just always packing because he was in the military. But like if you can't say no, that's not consent.
Yeah, that's it.
And when do you realize that you can't even acknowledge that no is even an option?
Yeah.
And I think that's why rape inside of like marital rape, nobody really knows how to talk about it, really.
Yeah.
Right? Because consent is this kind of strange concept anyway that's hard to define.
Yeah. I think it's getting easier to define, but still in some ways, like, it gets very nebulous in some ways where, because like, I think it's also consent and then talking about it in terms of power, like who has the power. Like you said, like, of course, like,
exactly.
Of course you were saying yes, but... Yeah.
Like I think Monica Lewinsky is like a perfect example of that. Like she would have tell you at the time back in the 90s, she would have told you that she had given consent, but then like she didn't have any power in that scenario either. So like, and so even inside of marriage, if you're in an abusive relationship, and I think it bears talking about that, like 1/3 of relationships like that have intimate partner violence has a component of sexual assault. So like 1/3 of marriages has domestic violence, but 1/3 of those also have sexual assault. So like 1/6 of all marriages are like, that's a really like jarring statistic.
That's not a small number.
No, it's really not. But it comes down to, and I think this is where like complementarianism and that idea of the man running the household or whatever can be really freaking dangerous. Like it's not just bad theology.
It's deadly.
Absolutely. Because I mean, I can tell you like 10 or 12 times where my life was literally in danger.
10 or 12?
Yes.
That's
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, like I'm not making a scoffing noise. It's one of those just like
Well, and I'm like awkwardly laughing because it sounds like it's so weird sometimes to even think back, even though like I wrote it and I lived it and I've done tons of therapy around it. It's still really kind of
still really weird,
surreal, yeah. To think like these are things that happen on TV.
Mm-hmm. Like this
but
is
that
like
was my life.
Yeah, this is some Law and Order SVU shit.
Absolutely. You know, like, it's not okay that I was thrown into walls. It's not okay that I was held down and slapped or whatever. Like, these things are not okay.
Yeah.
What? And it's not okay. It never was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this whole narrative right now with the Me Too movement. Although I love it. I think there's almost this sense that it's all we have to do is get these men out of power or these people. I don't want to just say men because it's not fair to people like Terry Crews or, you know, like there are other instances. Mm-hmm. Right. But that if we just remove these people or fire them or whatever, then that's it.
Mm-hmm. We've won. We've got them. Yeah. And it's not
like,
just
we
about...
still haven't helped the victim.
Mm-hmm.
We've stopped re-victimization. And that's important. And don't get me wrong. But there is a step further that we have to begin to acknowledge that these things cause major psychological wounds. Mm-hmm. And inside like church too, they cause spiritual wounds as well, right? Like, so I wrote in my book that I thought that I had to be pure and rape was incompatible with that. And therefore I thought I was incompatible to God.
Wow. That's real heavy.
But I think it's Kevin. I mean, we have to pretend. We cannot pretend like this stuff isn't real. You know, like
yeah. So as you were like with like the advent of like the Me Too movement, and then subsequently the Church Too movement, where people have been talking and really pushing these things to like the forefront of people's minds and consciousness, like. I think what you said, just like, it's not just about getting men who need to be taken out of power, but it needs to be about, again, caring for survivors and actually naming them. Like that's what they are, like survivors of sexual assault and rape. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, like we have to start having conversations within our church context about power dynamics and conversations about how people relate to one another, whether it's men to women, older ministers to parishioners, like what does healthy boundaries look like that keep all of us safe? Because I think also just like it's not just about like, you know, like these guys at the very top who are abusing people are not doing it just because they're bad people. It's because there's a system that taught them that they they can do this, that it's okay, that they're not going to get caught. And
maybe not even that they should.
Yeah, like they're owed this. Like, you know, you are doing the hard work of the Lord, and therefore, you know, they figure out some way of like twisting scripture and justifying it in their minds. That in their minds they're probably not even doing anything wrong.
I think the whole Bill Hybels thing really was like a gut check, right? Because he was like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Just highly allowed it, and then, you know, like. I think it's so strange to me. That we can believe in things like bodily resurrection and forgiveness of sin so readily, these incredible, audacious, faithful statements. But then when when a victim comes forward, our inclination is to not believe.
Shit.
Right? Like but that's what we do, is we believe in the unseen. We believe in the crazy, you know, and that's a good thing. But we also believe that people like David can fall hard and be rapists. Mm-hmm. You know, like I mean, that was the lectionary text the last 2 weeks was David and Bathsheba.
Yeah.
Right. And so like in the Hebrew, it's really clear that this is not a consensual relationship. Mm-hmm. David goes to extreme measures to hide this. Just like the church does. I mean, look at the Catholic Church. You know, like the measures they went to, the reorganization, the movement around, the constant shifting or to protect the institution. I mean, David didn't just murder Uriah, right? Like, it's a mass murder. It's Uriah's entire unit is killed to hide this.
It's nuts.
And I think if you look at like Willow Creek, they wanted to, they wanted to do that. And ultimately they did not. And I applaud that. But
it's just it's things that have come up in all sorts of other things. I think about like, what was the name of the guy from New Spring?
I can't think of his name, but I can see him.
I can see him too, and that's annoying. He just has an annoying face. But just like, like where he like stepped down from power and like cited alcoholism as the thing. And I'm just like, was it alcoholism? But
then they were kind of like weird about how they talked about it afterwards.
Yeah. Like, why?
Yeah, I know.
Why aren't you talking about your 12-step program, bruh?
Yeah, and I mean, like in Mars Hill, right, with Mark Driscoll and stuff like that.
And he's still like out and about, starting his own ministry again.
And people are publishing his books again.
It blows my mind.
I don't understand.
I mean, like on the one hand, I do understand because like, whiteness and maleness will get you everywhere. So like on that level, yes, I understand it. But from like when I'm being logical about it, I'm like, that is no.
Well, and I think also there's the reality that he can sell books.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, even Christian publishing is a market.
It's an industry.
It's an industry. They're trying to make money. And like he's someone who will sell. And unfortunately, probably more so because of the scandal, right? Like,
yeah.
What's he gonna say now?
Going back to something that like you touched on, just like the story of David and the rape of Bathsheba, like I think it's really interesting that like until someone else pointed that out to me, I didn't know. I was like, oh, she's just a loosey-goosey woman,
yeah,
obviously tempting the man. Like that's how I read the story.
Oh God, but that's still the story though. She was asking for it, right? Except she's not tempting. Like with the bath. She's like on her own balcony, taking her like ritual cleansing bath from her period. Right? Like this, she's following the law.
Yeah, she was out doing her own thing, like on her own private property, not wanting you to.
She was being holy, right? Like, and this this very unholy thing transpires against her body.
Like, as a pastor, when you're teaching on something like that, and then also like teaching, about the person of David who was called, a man after God's own heart. Like, how do you as a pastor, like begin to talk about that? Because I'm starting seminary in the fall and I'm already thinking about the really hard text I'm going to have to cover eventually. And I just don't know what to do with that.
So I think part of it takes time. You cannot just come into a congregation and hit them with the hard stuff.
So I can't just say, y'all, David raped Bathsheba. I just can't throw that out there.
And welcome. I'm glad to be here on my first Sunday. Right. Like, so there is a relationship that happens between clergy and congregation. And I think that's really important that you establish that sacred trust. So how do you do it? I think you do it slowly at first. And you establish that trust and you get to know them and know how they'll hear best. Because the last thing you want to do as a minister is say something very powerful that God has asked you to say, but in the wrong way where they don't hear it.
Yeah.
Because that's on you, right? Like that, if I speak with the tongues of angels, but do not have love, I'm nothing but a resounding gong. And so I think you have to develop some of that. So how do you do that? I think some of that happens maybe not from the pulpit first. But the reality is it's not when someone will come to your office having been sexually assaulted, or not if, it's when.
Yeah.
So I think you handle it more in those interpersonal at first. And you begin to address it, maybe even in small group settings. Like I self-disclosed my story in a small group setting first. And slowly as time goes on, then you can really begin to really tackle these these hard texts in a real way. But I think, like I said, I think it comes down to trust.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you get up there and you just like bring the hammer down, which you could do, and people do.
Yeah, as an 8 on the Enneagram, let me tell you what, I love bringing the hammer.
Yeah. I think you don't shy away from it necessarily. So my husband and I, we actually taught, we wrote and taught two different Bible studies this last year in small group settings over the book of Ruth and the book of Esther, mm-hmm. which both have like these kind of possible sexual components. Mm-hmm. Like Ruth, when she lays at his feet.
Boaz.
That could be a euphemism, right?
My mighty Boaz.
Yes. And we really talked about that. And is that one way to read it? Is it not? And so we said, nobody really knows if that's for sure. But here's what marriage looked like. And as soon as they're covered, right, like really addressing and kind of looking at these women at a whole. And then talking about when we talked about Esther, mm-hmm. the fact that she's expected to, in this really like sick beauty pageant, strip down and then perform in the bedroom. And if she is deemed good enough in that, then she can become the queen, or she becomes a concubine and is stuck with him anyway. Right. But then she had to use what she had too.
Hey, Chrissy, if you're still there, you can sign back on.
So like, what does that look like?
Has failed. Retrying.
Like reclaiming their entire story.
Hold on, everybody. Hey, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Sorry, you're back and you sound delicious.
That's perfect. That's what I was going for. Delicious.
Yeah. You were saying she was performing in a sick beauty pageant, having to perform in the bedroom.
And then she either gets to become queen because of how she performs, or then she becomes a concubine. But then this is all that she has her sexuality is all that she has to use in that system. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, how does she take power in that? Mm-hmm. Does she? Is she just a victim? And so we talked about that one night. And like I live in a pretty conservative area, but I thought that naming those things, adding depth to these characters and these stories, the real and the tawdry and the, people have asked us to teach it several times mm-hmm. after that. Partially because, and I think when you approach scripture in a really robust, real way, so few Bible studies do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
And people want more of it
mm-hmm.
when they get it. They don't realize they're lacking it. They don't realize they're living on scraps.
Yeah. They don't realize that, like you could be eating the full meal, but right now all you got is crumbs right now, honey.
Yes. Come to the feast. And
I think like reading the Bible through this, like more like through all these differing lenses than like what I was given growing up, at least like basically the word of God was the word of God. It's the NIV, and that's God speaks English.
At least you got the NIV, right? Yeah. It wasn't the King James. That's
oh my God. Thank God I had the NIV. Like I honestly I also but we also grew up in a world where Catholics weren't Christians. So,
Oh yeah.
So it was one of those things. Also, I remember specifically my uncle, who is a pastor to this day, and he doesn't listen to anything I put out. So this is why I feel okay saying this on the air. But one time he preached a sermon that Harry Potter was causing children to run away to Mexico to wizard school and magic school.
I'm so confused right now.
I know. And I'm just I didn't know there was a magic school in Mexico. If so, where do I go? I'm
wearing Gryffindor socks right now.
Oh my God. We would have been great friends at Hogwarts. Although apparently I am a Slytherin. So,
Oh man.
I'm totally Gryffindor. I think we could have had friendship across boundaries.
It would have been okay.
Yeah.
I'm a redhead, like the Weasleys, so I would have fit right in with them too.
And I'm a ginger beard, so it's just I'll probably be a little out of place in Slytherin, but we make it work. Well, let me do another question that just came to mind.
Yeah.
When you are, I don't know if you've already had experience with this, but just if somebody in hypothetically or not hypothetically, because it's going to happen, when somebody comes forward in your congregation with allegations of sexual assault against another member, against like a lay person or a clergy person, like what does the proper response even look like? Because I feel like it's like you said, like there's going to be the impetus to like not believe them at first, but just like how do we protect the victims? And like what does the process even look like? I don't even know where to begin.
Well, in the United Methodist Church, we have what's called safe sanctuaries. So we actually have a laid out process for it. And that has never happened to me, where it's been a member of the congregation. I've had victims come in, but it's never been that. So I think the first thing to do is to protect them first and foremost, to say, I hear you. The fact that they've come forward is huge. Right? Like so much of this goes on, like so many people don't say anything. And there's a lot of reason for that, right? Like I've heard accounts of people that have gone to trial and they said the trial was worse than the assault, right? Because it's like a group of lawyers going after their entire morality and all those kinds of stuff. But I think just telling someone they've been heard, giving them agency to decide what they think their next steps are, like not forcing them to go to the doctor, not forcing them to go to the police, because somebody just took all of their choices away. And so you as a clergy cannot do that.
Right.
It feels really natural to say, I want you to get justice because you deserve justice and we believe in justice because we're the church. And that's all well and good. And as you know, as a survivor yourself, someone just took your choice away. So I think the biggest thing is giving them back their choice.
Yeah.
I think how you stand or like engage with them is really important. Don't get behind a desk.
Right.
If you can't get out from behind it, like don't stand in a position of power.
Yeah. Go sit with them.
Yes. Or next to them, or, let them lead, I think is really important. But just, I think calmly listening and writing everything down, taking time to reflect and time to think, not ever saying, "Oh, are you sure?"
Oh yeah, like just if they say it happened,
and maybe you question it, and that's fine, but do it inside your head,
yeah.
Right? Like, at first, I mean, you listen, but like I keep going back to, I'm just so confused by why we can believe in Holy Communion. As a means of grace, and that there's real presence of God in these ordinary things. But when someone says that person whom you may think is wonderful touched me, I don't know how to believe you.
Yeah. It's weird. It's messed up. And I think we're getting to a point, and like, I'm hoping like that as we're just continuing on the trajectory that we're going on, that, I think maybe in some ways, like things will get worse before they get better. But
isn't that the reality of life, though?
Right.
Death always precedes resurrection, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's what I see. See a lot of things like happening, like within like the Big C church, of just like, there are ways of doing church that are not going to survive the next 10 years.
Oh yeah. Lots of them.
Yeah.
They really probably aren't surviving now.
Yeah. I wonder what it's going to be like. It's probably going to be like dreadfully ordinary. And probably like a lot smaller than we think it's going to be, or it could, I don't know. I
think accountability really matters.
Yeah. Say more.
I think it's so easy, unfortunately, for us to get lost in our sin. As individuals too. Like, I think we forget, like I went to a sleep doctor the other day, and he found out what I did, and he was like, do you smoke or drink or do drugs? And he goes, oh wait, you're a pastor, you wouldn't do those things. I said, like alcohol actually is a really big problem among ministers because there's so much stress. And he was like, what?
Like,
And I guess like he's like, I guess everybody has their sin. And I was like, that is a super judgmental, like, do people really think that? But I think there for so long was this conception that we were above making mistakes. And maybe we even started to believe that.
Yeah. You stopped being people and you just like, you were just pastors the whole time. I have so many clergy friends who tell me that they're not themselves. They are pastor or reverend, whoever. Like for them, like their entire platform, their entire way of moving through the world, the way that their friends see them even, or the parishioners see them, they don't see them as a fully actualized human, but rather as like this almost superhuman figure. Like, heaven forbid they ever have like a bad day or a struggle or doubt with any of the things. It's almost like this like, superhuman.
Yeah, and I think that's really isolating.
Yes, for sure.
But when we isolate ourselves, I mean, that's when we start to do really crappy, horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one's holding you accountable and no one's keeping you with God. Mm-hmm. You know all about God, but you may not know God anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Like going back to David. David started off slaying Goliath, right? Like being, you know, like fighting for his life. Mm-hmm. Trusting God and not murdering Saul when he has the chance, right? And then you fast forward to this downfall. I mean, he didn't wind up there one day, just out of the blue.
It was a slow journey towards.
Yes, there's a trajectory. And I think that when we stop allowing people into our life, I think the relationships really matter. So yeah, I would agree that sometimes I feel like I'm always Pastor Chrissy. Mm-hmm. And there's some good and bad in that. And I think sometimes it helps me.
Yeah. And I think that's like, honestly, accountability and true vulnerability within community is the thing that I think will help push these conversations forward. Because like, it's like you said, when you are isolated at the top of like a power pyramid, that's when weird things can start happening. If you don't have any peers around you to like check you, to ask you the tough questions, or to even like allow you to be vulnerable enough. I know that like when like I look at all these like different pastors who struggle with, you know, all manner of addiction, you know, infidelity, you know, sexual appetites that are no longer being met. It's because you're not talking about the things that are going on inside, because you don't feel like you have the space for it, because you think that you have to be Superman or Superwoman.
And eventually we crack under that, right? Like,
yeah,
because it's an unfair expectation on ourselves. It's an unholy, arrogant stance too.
Yes.
Like that is not how we can come before the King of creation to be transformed, just by assuming that I'm holy and good and therefore you should follow me. Like, yeah. Like that vulnerability and that humility. Mm-hmm. God, if we don't come before God with that, like what are we offering?
Yeah. Come on. That's good.
And I'm not sure when we isolate ourselves if we're offering anything to God anymore.
You better say that. Because like even like I look back at like the Old Testament, just like it was all about like the collective ritual, the collective sacrifice together for the people.
Community is so key to Christianity. But we don't practice that at all. I mean, it's almost like the opposite. So I'm United Methodist, and John Wesley had 3 questions that they were supposed to ask whenever they got together that hold them in their like accountability group type things. Mm-hmm. And the first one was, how is it with your soul? Which, okay, that one's kind of easy, right? Like you can answer that one. The next one is, what sins have you committed since we were last together?
Oh shit. That's
right. Like we're going there. And then the third one is, what are you afraid to tell us? Basically. Like
wow. John Wesley. He's a real one. I didn't even know.
And if you didn't answer those correctly, you could be like, they would be like, okay, so you backslid and you need to work on those before we can allow you back in this community. Like we're holding you to that. You're not kicked out, but you need to get things right with God. And I think losing that was a real detriment to not only my denomination, but to the Christian faith, of that I have to maintain relationships that keep me on my knees.
That keep me accountable and that keep...
Yes.
And I think, honestly, like, that's the thing that still keeps me in faith in general and, like, in the church, is because on my own, I am ready to do some stupid shit, I think.
Right. Like, we'd be complete monsters to each other on our own.
I literally, some people are just like, why do you still do religion? Because just like, why can't you just like be a good person outside of morality? I'm just like, if you can do that, if you can like hold on to morality and be a good person by yourself, I say more power to you. You're saving time, money, energy. Probably like your skin's probably better. But for someone like me who will readily admit that I just don't know what the shit I'm doing half the time, like, I will fully admit that I need God and I need other people to like show me, to hold up a mirror so that I can see the parts of me that I need to address, and then also at the same time hold up a mirror so that I'm not always drowning in my own self-doubt and self-deprecation. I needed a community to tell me that I'm loved.
Yeah, that I'm good enough. Yeah.
That was my conversation with Chrissy Reeves Pendergrass. You can connect with her across social media at Chrissy Reeves Pendergrass, which is just the one word. And you can also get with her on her website, which is chrissyreeves-pendergrass.com. And yeah, I'll put all those links in the show notes. Chrissy, thank you so much for being with me on A Tiny Revolution. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story. Also, book her to come to your church to talk about stuff. Book her to talk about sexual assault in the church, about Church 2, all that good stuff. She's incredible. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that. A Tiny Revolution is supported by 127 amazing people on Patreon. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's an amazing platform that allows you, the listener, to get involved with the creative process and support the creatives in your lives who are creating content that actually matters. So if you loved this podcast, if you think this conversation was important and you want to make more content like it possible, become a supporting partner. It's as simple as that. Even as little as $1 or $2 or $5 or $15, if you flex them like that, any amount helps make this more sustainable, especially now that I'm starting graduate school. It really, really helps to have the support of people like you to make this work possible, so that way I'm not having to hold down 18 different jobs. So thank you so much to everyone who's been supporting me throughout my creative processes these past 3 years, and thank you for anyone who's signing on today. So just go over to patreon.com/TheKevinGarcia and sign up. Take advantage of some sweet perks. There's a Slack channel. There's t-shirts going out soon. Literally, what more could you want? Plus, I know that you got $1 or $2. Listen, if you're the kind of person who listens to a podcast, you're probably also the kind of person who buys their coffee or tacos. Think about, if you can afford tacos, you can afford to throw me $5 a month, honey. So that's it. I'm gonna stop preaching at you and whatnot. But anyways, other things, if you can support the podcast by just leaving a review on iTunes, that would be a huge help. You do that right in your podcast app. Just leave it 5 stars, tell people why you love it, and then share it on social media, because honestly, that's how we get people connected with this show, and that's how we get more people listening to better stories about their lives, honey. That's about all I've got to say. Go get your tickets for Reformation Project before the tickets prices go up on Friday. I don't think I mentioned that before. Ticket prices are going up on Friday. It's like $175. You don't want to pay that. You want to pay a lower price. Go there now. reformationproject.org/Orlando. I'll see you there. I think that's everything from me. So yeah, go drink some water, go see your therapist, move your body, eat something delicious, and shout out to my friend Anna. She's at Owlpost Lettering on Instagram. Made this really cool little graphic design of the shit I say at the end of the podcast, which is just, it was so amazing for me to see. So go follow her on Instagram and yeah, do all those things. Drink some water, go see your therapist, move your body, eat something delicious. Listen to the new Troye Sivan album if you haven't already. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's a good shake it up tune. I'm done talking. This has been another episode of A Tiny Revolution. My name is Kevin Garcia, and I will talk to y'all very, very soon. Bye!